Um, we're dealing with a large deficit, and we're also trying our utmost to stimulate economic growth in the province to enable us to have resources and more prosperity for the province in the long term. Every jurisdiction around the world is also implicated with the situation at hand. So stimulus funding and infrastructure funding is something that we've been doing as well. At the same time, we're trying to balance loss of revenue. As you know, the economic downturn has affected a lot of our manufacturing and businesses, so we're trying to do our utmost to stimulate that growth through tax reform packages. On the other side of the coin, and we see a lot of this when we do our public consultations, and this is the third one now that I've done, is trying to balance the needs of those services. Hospitals, education, social services. We want to be sure to enable that to continue. We're not going to try to cut services. That's not our intent. Balancing the act is the tough part, and trying to remain fiscally responsible and socially conscious. So that's the intent of what we're trying to do, and we're out here trying to appreciate those concerns from those that are immediately affected.
It's still early days for the committee because you still have a number of cities that you have to get to before you can really formulate the, what the feedback of what you've heard to. But is there one key message you're hearing from the groups, or three top? What are you hearing?
And they're rather consistent over, it's not just this particular time, it's been happening throughout. And initially, last year especially, we found ourselves in a pretty tough spot. A lot of corporates and businesses saying, listen, we're not able to compete effectively. Our Canadian dollar's at parity. And you're trying to slow it down. Our Canadian dollar's at parity, so we're losing that to some extent on that regard. Energy costs have risen, so the input costs of those companies are tough. All we have left is try to find ways to reform our tax system to enable them to be more competitive. But at the same time, we got to protect the needs of consumers and ensure that we have a system in place that makes us competitive. And our competitiveness will not only is it dependent upon having that economic issue, but having good education and having a skilled workforce. And also, Ontario is a competitive jurisdiction because we have universal health care. So we got to protect all those elements in the things that we do. In a per capita basis, Ontario is not unlike some of the other jurisdictions. On a GDP, Ontario is huge. It's still the largest contributor to the nation. And it's incumbent upon all of us to get this right.
And where do we start? When you look at this committee and you start devising these recommendations, for next year's budget, does Ontario look forward to cuts or tax increases, or are we too early to say that?
There's some tough choices to make, and a lot of the discussions that we've had over this week at least has been about prioritizing. What do we do first or second? And, those are the decisions we'll have to make going forward. But we got to be realistic. We've got to manage the book. We've got to manage this thing effectively so that those social services aren't impacted or negatively impacted or worsened. We've got to make sure that that is served. At the same time, we've got to make certain that those priorities and where we spend our money is done effectively. More importantly than that, though, we got to find ways to increase our generation of revenue. And I'm not talking about increasing taxes, in as much as I'm talking about increasing volume of revenue through more companies and more business activity to the country and to the province.